Lawrence, a lot of athletes and active people use caffeine before or during prolonged endurance activities to boost their performance. Why does caffeine improve your performance?
Well, what we think today is that the major reason why caffeine boosts your performance is it has an effect on the central nervous system. Years ago, we thought it might have some peripheral effects, like sparing muscle glycogen and things like that. But lately, there's been a move towards much lower doses of caffeine that still seem to boost performance. And that seems to suggest that its major effect is on the brain itself.
So it's kind of a mental effect.
Yes, it's potentially affecting the brain in many ways. It may affect how well you send signals to contract the muscles, and it also may affect the feedback. So for instance, when people take caffeine, they rate the exercise as easier as compared to not taking caffeine. There's also several studies that suggest you don't feel as much pain when you're doing exercise that's associated with pain. So I think it's probably a combination of effects inside the central nervous system.
And there are some people that use caffeine to reduce their body fat. Could caffeine be a great weight loss strategy?
No, it can't actually. There's been quite a few studies that have tried to look at just caffeine in terms of boosting your 24/7, if you will, all day long metabolism, and they haven't shown very positive results. Okay. There have been some results earlier where they combined caffeine with ephedrine, and they did see some positive results. But of course, ephedrine is now illegal over the counter in most countries in the world because it has some serious side effects. So caffeine on its own does not seem like a good weight loss agent.
So is a cup of coffee or espresso before my exercise the right choice?
Well, I would probably argue that for the average individual, or for most people on this planet, that would be the way in which they would take in their caffeine. And many people have argued that if it's part of your daily routine, then you would not deviate from that. But of course, many athletes will use tablets of caffeine, or they will buy products that have a bit of caffeine in the product so that they can take it when they want, either before the activity or during the activity. There's also been some companies that have produced products to have caffeine in a so-called sports drink. So there would be many different ways, and like most things, I think anyone working with an athlete would work with them to decide what is best for them.
And if I take a specific caffeine supplement, do I need the same dose, like for example, like you?
Well, traditionally the doses of caffeine are given per kilogram body mass. And in the early days, there were many studies where people were taking high doses of caffeine. And the reason for that was that they were taking the amount of caffeine they could take so that it was not an illegal amount in their body. So they were taking 9 or 8 milligrams per kilogram body mass, which for a 70 kilogram individual is a lot of caffeine. 600 milligrams of caffeine, which would be 3 or 4 cups of coffee. But recently, we found that doses as little as 3 milligrams per kilogram body mass, so about 200 milligrams, which you could get in a strongly brewed cup of coffee, is also effective. And people are either taking it an hour, 45 minutes before they do their activity, and other people, or endurance athletes, are not taking any before the activity, but taking the caffeine usually in the latter half of their activities where they're becoming more fatigued, because the caffeine, if anything, seems to be even more powerful once you're already tired.
Can I mix caffeine with other ingredients, like for example carbohydrates or creatine, to get a superior effect?
Yes, you can. I mean, there was a lot of concern, and there were some initial studies that when you took creatine, for instance, that caffeine didn't work. And if you were on a high carbohydrate diet, caffeine didn't work. But I can say that almost all of those things have now shown not to be true. So you can take caffeine if you're a habitual caffeine user or you're a non-user, if you're male or female, if you're on a high carbohydrate diet or not. There's now been studies to show that if you've supplemented with creatine, caffeine still works.
Okay.
Another popular one is taking caffeine along with sodium bicarbonate or beta-alanine, and it doesn't seem that there are any interactions that would be negative.
So if I'm drinking a lot of Coke and coffee all day, it probably doesn't help me to take any caffeine supplementation?
Right. So if you're a fairly serious caffeine user and you have 3 or 4 doses of caffeine in colas or coffees during the day, then most people that do that would in fact target one of those to be sort of their pre-workout caffeine. So if I'm a morning runner, I might have a cup of coffee before I go for a run, or if I'm in afternoon or evening. We find that most of the people that take caffeine, they do adjust one of their caffeine intakes during the day to coincide with preparation for sport.